So they say that the best camera is the camera that you carry on you, the camera that you've got in your hand when that decisive moment pops up. Most people don't walk around with an X-T2 in their hands. Most people walk around with a mobile phone. But what do you do if you don't have a brand spanking new Samsung Galaxy S10 or one of those fancy new Huawei's that everyone's talking about? What if, like me, you're a little bit of a cheapskate and you find yourself saddled with a positively ancient 3.5-year-old iPhone 7? Can you really take effective street photos with this? And can those street photos be comparable to what you get out of the likes of an X-T2? Well, that's the challenge I set, and it took me from Ireland to London to France. Let's see if we can turn my phone into a street photo camera. The first step on this street photo adventure is nowhere exotic. It's actually the studio because my 3-year-old camera needed a bit of a makeover. The first problem was the amount of storage on the device. I would recommend doing a factory reset of your entire camera, but here I decided to jump into Netflix and delete some offline shows to free up space. Goodbye Rick and Morty Season 3. It's actually about time the 4th season was out already. Then followed by Amazon Prime. One of the most effective ways of freeing up space is actually to purchase additional Apple Cloud storage. Costs something like 79p a month. Your phone will then automatically offload old pictures to free up space for new ones. Finally, it was time to unlock the true power of this device. The iPhone 7 has a 12 megapixel camera with an f1.8 lens and a 5x digital zoom, so no fancy optical zoom in this model. In Apple's quest to make every photo a good photo, sadly, no photo becomes a great photo. And then obviously this being a phone means there's no control over things like aperture or shutter speed, and it's largely thanks to Apple's software. In fact, you could say Apple's software is limiting the performance of their hardware. So it was time to install a third-party camera app. After much deliberation, I settled on ProCam 7. ProCam's a nifty little tool. It unlocks a lot of functionality on the device, which meant I now had control over things like shutter speed and aperture, things you sort of take for granted in any DSLR. Better yet, I could shoot in RAW, in burst mode. Yep, RAW and burst mode on an old iPhone. Great setup for some street photos. Before leaving London, I decided to test out the new camera functionality in circumstances where I felt the stock iPhone would stumble, namely places like the underground. I post-processed the images as I normally would in Lightroom, and really the results were actually pretty impressive straight away. Let's zoom in a bit so you can see how the images hold up. Then it was off to Ireland. I continued to snap away throughout the journey, again trying to find ways to really push the camera. Take this one for example. This image is taken with the stock Apple software, which is great if I wanted my focus to be on the man, but what if I wanted to see out the window? A bit of playing with levels on the unlocked iPhone produced this. A well exposed but not blown out image. The power's in the lens, just not the software. So I went to the wedding, got drunk, had a good time and took some fairly uninteresting photographs around Belfast city centre. The only real image of interest was a little girl in KFC under an umbrella, which was pretty fun, and the colours from the iPhone's RAW file really did pop. So after the wedding in Belfast, myself and my mum and my girlfriend were heading to France for a little holiday. But my mum's got an irrational fear of planes, which meant I had to take her on the boat, followed by a 20-hour bus ride. The boat was a fantastic place to put the phone through its paces. While not street photography, the boat did allow me to shoot some super interesting angles and really push the settings of the camera to create some dramatic scenes. Things like these angry skies would have been completely washed out by the Apple software. From a boat in the Irish Sea to the top of the Eiffel Tower in France, I kept the phone on me at all times. It was in the suburbs of France that I really started playing with even more handy settings, things like zebra stripes for overexposed areas, which are pretty commonplace in these kinds of apps, but was still very much appreciated considering I was shooting in bright sunlight. It was at this point in the trip that I decided to whip out my Fujifilm X-T2, and it's when you start to compare these images is when the limitations of the iPhone really start to show up. Let's start with an easy test. This lady, she's standing outside a subway, iPhone on the left, X-T2 on the right. At first glance, both these look pretty comparable. They've been processed using the exact same settings with no added grain on either image. This is taken from around 12 feet from the subject. When we zoom in, we can see grain and artifacts start to creep their way into the iPhone photo, whereas the X-T2 is still spotless. This image is mostly in shade and gives us a good impression of how the artificial software-controlled aperture on the iPhone introduces artifacts on a whole nother level when in low light. See how muddy those Pringle boxes are starting to get? And this is just at 12 feet. Finally, look at an image from 50 feet or more away. The iPhone holds up just fine when viewed here at around 20% of its full resolution. But say you wanted to crop in to print a photo of just the man. Could you do it? Well, no. This is where the iPhone flat out fails. It's fine for viewing on a small screen, even up to 100%, but zoom in and this is where a combination of the iPhone's hardware and software mimicry really do let it down. Add to this massive battery loss, a generous file size for the raw photos, and lots of strain on the iPhone's processor, which sometimes meant it could take up to 2 full seconds for the phone to take a photo after pressing the shutter button. It's not exactly ideal for street photography and perhaps is the iPhone's biggest drawback. So what does this all mean? Does it mean the iPhone, despite handling itself pretty well up to this point, is actually pretty useless? Well, not at all. It actually still makes a really good little travel and occasional street camera, as long as the circumstances and environment are favorable. Check out the rest of these iPhone photos from the trip before I give my final opinion. So there you have it, the results are in. And it's actually quite surprising. This thing really can hold its own, but only when it's unlocked and you get out of that stock Apple software ecosystem. And like everything, there are caveats. The first is how you're going to use the images that you capture on this device. They're never ever going to be print worthy, simply because the sensor really just isn't as good as what you get on a mainstream DSLR. Yes, it can play in that same arena, but not if you want to print the photos. They just end up far too messy for that. The second major drawback I talked about during the video, and it's speed. The thing is an absolute drag to use. In certain circumstances, it took a couple of seconds to take a photo. And as you guys know, when you're out on the street and you're trying to capture that perfect street photo moment, timing is everything. And those are the two big areas that it lacks. Going back to how this video started, that quote about how the best camera is the one that you have on you in any one moment, phones are still really good for that. They're not going anywhere anytime soon and they're just going to get better. But if you do have an older phone like me, it's worth perhaps unlocking it and getting a little bit used to that new software environment. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a fancy DSLR on you, it's better than nothing. So this is the first part in what will be an ongoing content series on this channel, where I investigate if older technologies can do the job of a 2019 street photo camera. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up. If you loved it, hit subscribe. And for you guys who come back week after week, let me know what you thought of the video in the comments below. Until next week, hit the streets.